We'll go ahead and get started wherever you are. Really thrilled that you are joining us today. I'm Justin Clifford. I work at Bereave, and I'm going to be your host today. Loss Leaders, this program is called Loss Leaders. It's a program centered around how companies could and we think really should step up when loss occurs in the lives of their employees. And the reason that we do these programs is that Bereave is on a mission to really help companies provide the absolute best possible bereavement response when their employees suffer a loss. And in that pursuit, we get to meet incredible people, partners, investors, just people doing great things out in the world that can really bring so much education to business leaders that are working to build a more compassionate and empathetic workplace. So this really is our effort to get them in front of you. And I think we're at episode like 34, 35 or something like that, past the 12-month mark. So we're going to continue to do these. The chat is open, as I mentioned. We'll monitor for questions. Please, it's highly encouraged. Let's make this a discussion where we can. And we're going to go to roughly 45 past the hour, and we'll get recordings out. They will be available on LinkedIn almost right away as well. Now, enough of my banter. You're here for Jordan Arogetti. Jordan is the co-founder and CEO of SupportNow, based out of Dunwoody, near Atlanta, where they help families by rallying groups of supporters to really reduce all of the overwhelm during major life moments. Think about opportunities for fundraising, coordinating meals, providing a central location for updates on that situation, there's opportunities to help with a family's to-dos. Logistics, picking things up, grocery shopping, mowing the lawn, anything that the family might need as they move through a new phase of their life. In 2024, this is super cool. In 2024 alone, they supported over 5,000 families, had over 4,000 volunteers helping those families through the platform, and helped raise over $2 million to help those families through those moments. So SupportNow is becoming a very, very powerful and probably critical tool to use through these moments. And we're thrilled. Jordan, welcome to Loss Leaders.
Thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate an opportunity to share more about SupportNow, of course, and we're always grateful for our partnership with Bereave, who is so mission aligned with what we're doing. So I know we'll have a very meaningful and thoughtful conversation today.
Yeah. And I totally forgot about probably mid 2023, we started being a little bit more public, Bereave did, about what we were going to go do. And I had, I think, probably 3 people in my network call me and say, hey, you've got to meet Jordan and Scott from SupportNow. And that connection was almost immediate in the eyes of a lot of people that know what our respective companies do.
I love it.
So I know we're going to talk about support languages today, which is a relatively new concept to me, which you've introduced me to. But can you give a little bit of context to why the concept of SupportNow, the concept of support languages is really important to you and your team?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of background on SupportNow. My husband and I, we don't have a particularly sad story. There's not a loss that we've, there hasn't been a significant loss that has, meaningfully moved us in this direction. We've been very, very fortunate. Our whole perspective on SupportNow comes from the supporter point of view. And frankly, it also comes from previous experience at a fantastic company. A company called Sales Loft here in Atlanta, where I witnessed firsthand the importance of support, not just from family and friends, but also from colleagues. And so the thought process behind SupportNow really came from COVID, where I felt like every day I was getting a phone call, an email, a text message that someone I loved was going through something, whether that was a family member in the hospital, whether that was a baby in the NICU, a cancer diagnosis, a house fire. And I noticed this unique trend that people tend to lean into cash or casseroles. And which was really interesting to me because I'm now busy on these text chains and everyone's trying to figure out what to do. Everyone wants to do something. And I thought, it's so odd to me that we're very limited by this, we're very conditioned to believe that we can give money, we can give meals, and that's it. When I know that's not true. And so my background, again, is in sales and technology. And so I just started doing a lot of research on this. And so I thought, could it be possible to build a more compassionate, empathetic place where you can both raise money, you can organize meals, but you can also share updates and you can coordinate volunteers. So SupportNow is an all-in-one support platform. It's completely free, and it is designed so that whether you're a HR leader, a frontline manager, a best friend, a neighbor, that you can say, we know that there's a community of people that want to help you, and now we're going to give you a place to deposit that. And on that journey, and over the last couple of years, I've met with thousands of our customers and learned a lot about their experiences walking in these challenging seasons of life. And I began to coin this phrase called support languages. And so I actually am very nervous and excited, but I'll be delivering a TED Talk next month on introducing this concept of support languages to the world to really better equip people to show up in their authentic way and to provide more meaningful support to the people they love when they're going through difficult moments.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like you almost like may have even stumbled into this, just identifying some patterns and trends in the way people talk, in the way what's missing in the way people talk, or maybe what's working in the way people talk. Is that kind of how this evolved?
Yeah, completely. It was, we have a podcast as well, but as part of my job, just like you, I'm talking to people to do research and to understand what was their experience like, not just with SupportNow, just if you get a cancer diagnosis or you again have a baby or a child with a chronic illness or disability. I want to understand, what has your community done that's been helpful? What hasn't been helpful? What have people said that's been great? What are things that they've said that aren't great? Sure. And so through this just research and due diligence, trying to really create a frame of reference, and it all made sense. And so to be, a little bit more specific, what I was learning is that people said money is helpful, food is helpful. What I really need is someone to walk my dog. Mm-hmm. I need someone to watch my kid. I need someone to pray for me. I need someone to do these things. And that's really where I fell in love with this concept of, wow, if people knew that who they are and their natural instinct to help was enough, could we reduce the isolation that people feel when they're going through these major life moments? And that's so much of the spirit behind what we're doing and how we've created both how we've created the platform, as well as the support languages talk and the things that we're developing on this personality test. And that's really what it is, so that people can really hone in on that support language and then again be in a better position to show up for the people they love.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna go off script and I'm gonna put you on the hot seat, and maybe like give the elevator pitch for support languages. I mean, we know love languages, right? Yes. And I'm sure it's kind of a little bit of a riff off that. We know love languages at work. We know love languages, just love languages. The first book that was written on it. So if you're gonna pitch like, hey, have you heard of support languages? This is what it is.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
So the simple way of explaining it is a support language is the unique way you naturally respond to help someone in need. And we've developed a personality test to help people find theirs. There's 8 different support languages. I can't yet say what all of them are out of respect for the TED, but effectively it really is it's a test that has a few different variables. We've identified 3 different decision points that people have to make when they're deciding how to step up. One of those categories is how you socialize. So are you independent or are you collaborative? The other is activation. Are you assertive, i.e. like, do you take the initiative or are you adaptive? Do you prefer to wait for direction? And then lastly, it's around actions. Do you tend to be more tangible in the way that you want to give support, i.e. taking something off a to-do list? Or are you more relational, meaning you would prefer to be a listening ear? Mm-hmm. So through this test and through really answering questions in those categories, we can share with you what your support language is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the applicability in these situations when you find out something happened to somebody. But I'm also thinking about even just like personal conversations when, my wife comes and has something today that might not be catastrophic, but make it a tough day, right? Now I know, like, I don't even have to know. I should know her love language. I should know how to communicate with her. But in case I don't, and there's a person that, is new, at least I know who I am and how I might be able to show up. Correct. And I think that piece of that is, like, that's even the harder thing when you're thinking about like love languages, as an example. I know what hers are, but I've had to really work to figure out like who I am to be able to deliver those things.
Totally.
Right. Because they're almost in conflict. Like, it takes extra energy for me to do that unless I know about it. And now I can actually go and provide the right type of support. So I know we're talking about some, big life moments, but I do see some applicability, and you've been through this and have thought about it, but like this applicability for just like regular conversations about tough days and understanding a little bit more about who we are as individuals, which helps us react in the ways that I think are probably most helpful to others.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, similar to a DISC personality profile, Myers-Briggs, love languages, it's just another lens to understand both who you are and who the people around you are, because particularly when it is around a major life moment, normally there is a group of people that are congregating around a family, right? And so if you understand your support language and you understand your friend's support language, you can better work together to ensure that the experience is not just smooth for the person you're supporting, but also for each other. It just helps you all better understand where your natural instincts are, where your talents are, where your gifts are. And so, very much so. We would love to be in the everyday vernacular, of course, for not just major life moments, but for all the things that happen. And again, not necessarily negative. They can also be positive, such as getting married or having a baby. Like, these are just the natural ways that we want to show up when when a major event happens.
Yeah. There's a lot of application, obviously, to what SupportNow does. And there's obviously like this big, just thinking about startup life and where you are and where Bereave is, there's like a marketing component to this, but there's obviously a much deeper element here. I'm curious, like, what have you found when you've kind of bumped this idea off of people? What are you finding that they feel like is the most important piece of this concept to them personally?
On support languages specifically? I think that the thing that people are taking away from it the most is we've all collectively been through a lot the last couple of years. COVID, increasingly extreme natural disasters, and then certainly our own individual diagnoses, accidents, and loss. And what people are taking away from it the most is just how frequent these things are, and how, as a culture, we've kind of developed this unfortunate habit of being very isolated in these moments. And again, I think COVID was a huge contributor of this. We stopped going out, we stopped seeing people. And the push and the energy that I'm seeing and the feedback I'm getting on the talk from the few people I've shared it with is that it actually just inspires them to show up at all. Because and I'm sure you do from the families that you support, the most challenging part for families when they're going through something, especially loss, is they feel alone. And they don't have to feel alone, but that's on supporters, that's on the community to better understand that they are already capable of showing up in a meaningful way. We just have to really tap into that. And so it's like anything. Once you can label and like identify who you are, you're now in a position to show up. And a lot of people are just so uncertain of what they can do. And because they're not sure, they do nothing. And then they feel guilty. And how many relationships I've seen and heard that become strained as a result of inaction. And that just doesn't need to happen anymore. And I've studied this a good bit where, as a society, we used to live in villages, right? Like you would
Right.
share a home with another family, and then maybe you didn't, and then you would live side by side. There were no doors, the windows were open, and slowly we've moved away from that. And with those changes in the way that we live, it's also impacted the way we support each other. And so almost what I'm trying to get to, both with Support Now and Support Languages, is almost like bringing people back to that village and really bringing meaning back to what it means to support somebody. Because we are innately, as humans, designed to come together when these things happen. And just by nature of how our culture has progressed, we're a very individualist culture. We live very, in a sprawling neighborhoods today. Naturally, the way that we show up has evolved, and certainly COVID kind of pushed us in the wrong direction. Now I think it's time to kind of bring us back to our roots.
Yeah. Yeah. Even as you said, I mean, the amount of times that I've been, at a playground with our kids, and, I see a child running and I stop and say, "Hey, you got to go this way." And somebody says, "Oh, it takes a village," right? It's just like that concept. I think people say it all the time, but I don't really think people really understand kind of like where it came from and how important it is to have people around you, whether you know them or trust them or not, but that are in kind of a similar season sometimes, that can step up and know exactly where you're coming from and can lend that hand. I'm curious, you were talking about like strenuous relationships. I heard you say people feeling alone. And that's one of the things we hear a lot about when people suffer a close loss at work, or while employed, I should say, and they come back to work. And we've heard all sorts of stories, and I'm sure you have too, about how people re-enter and, coworkers that usually would just hop over and say hi and talk about the day now like turn and walk the other direction, or look down to the ground and they don't know what to say. And people end up leaving jobs because of that. How do you see we've talked kind of like general, like in our village and in our circles, but how do you see this playing out at work?
Yeah.
If any differently.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Again, I'm fortunate to have a point of view on support at work in a positive way, but to your point, so many people don't. And so again, I think so much about our perspective at Support Now and through Support Languages is around this idea of educating people on what support means, and being okay with the fact that you might not be the type of person that is the listening ear. But you need to know that.
Yeah. Yes.
You need to understand that, not because it's a problem, but because if you understand that, you might be able to better articulate to your colleague whom you love, hey, this just isn't who I am. I show support differently. And everyone can acknowledge that we all have different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to all facets of our life. But unless you have that knowledge and that education, you're not able to have more mature relationships and frankly, to do the work inside to figure out, okay, well, I can't do this, but what else can I do? I mean, again, I believe that everyone is capable of support. It just looks differently.
Sure.
So many people go through life thinking, oh, if I can't give money, or if I can't cook a meal, or if I'm not a good listener, I'm out. It's just not true. And I think, in technology companies, especially, companies talk a lot about bringing your whole self to work. How many times have we heard that phrase? I want you to bring your whole self to work.
Whole self.
I used to laugh at that. I'm like, are you sure about that? Because I got a lot of stuff at home. I got 3 young kids. I'm tired. I got a lot going, are you sure you want me to bring my whole self to work? But if a company wants you to bring your authentic self and wants you to bring your whole self to work, that also means they have to have the tools and the resources to support the whole person as well. And I think a lot of companies say they want to do that, but they're not actually doing that. You have to invest. If you mean investing in the whole person, That means not just doing the professional training. It means acknowledging that things happen every day to people, positive and not so positive, that you have to arm your leadership team with and your frontline managers with.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just so important, even if you're not going to, do a support languages test for your whole staff, which is fine. Your frontline managers in particular, they have to be equipped with not just professional skills, but the people skills and the emotional intelligence to know and to learn how they can navigate really difficult times, not just for themselves, but for the people they manage, because that is where the trust is built between your direct report and them, and then ultimately the respect and the trust that employee is going to have for the leadership team and the company overall.
Sure. I it's interesting. You mentioned leadership, you mentioned frontline managers, and frontline managers often are almost the first responder in some of these situations, especially if you get a phone call and you're at work in office. Like, that frontline manager might be that first person outside of that at the other end of that phone call to know what's going on in that person's life. When you think about like where that fits in, and I'm going to hang on to work here for a second, but like where that fits in to all of the other things that managers need to get trained on, and that managers are getting trained on. Well, sometimes, hopefully are getting trained on. They don't get trained on much. But where do you place the emphasis? Like if you're the CEO at, let's call it Sales Loft, right? If you're Kyle, and you're thinking about how important this is versus all of the other things that managers need to know to do their job well and to put people on a good path to success. Like, where do you slot this in?
Listen, it's hard, right? And as a CEO myself, I've had to realize kind of all the balls that people are juggling in the air at the same time, and especially in startup land where people are, trying to figure it out before they run out of money. So, it's very hard when you're trying to have a mission critical focus on the business and also do right by your employees. Here's what I'll say. I believe that as much as I would love companies to take a top line or top down approach to properly resourcing their frontline managers and mid manager levels. Ultimately, I believe that if you're a frontline manager or in leadership, it is incumbent upon you to constantly be assessing where you can strengthen, because it's, I'm not saying anything anyone hasn't heard before. It's like the Maya Angelou quote, people will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. And so to me, if a leadership team doesn't have the money or the time to do those things, I don't think that should prevent someone who's very serious about leadership, who wants to lead, to look beyond the resources that a company might be providing and to seek that elsewhere. Because as we all know, especially in this generation, most people don't stay at a company for their entire career. And so people and employees that move on, they will remember less about the company. They will remember their manager and how they responded in that particular situation. What's really unique about what we offer is it's free.
Sure.
The quiz is free. SupportNow is free. It's all free. So there's no barrier to entry. The only barrier to entry is really incumbent upon us to make people aware that these resources exist for them. And so as much as, my dream in, the next couple of years is that companies across the world are doing us, support languages quiz, and they're rolling out SupportNow whenever they hear the news that something has happened to their employee, that'd be great. And in the time between when that happens today and when that happens, there's nothing stopping someone from going beyond, again, the resources that they're being provided from their company themselves.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love it. That's such a great response, Jordan. Especially like from a frontline manager perspective and somebody who is working on their career and wanting to get better at becoming a better leader. There's a lot of ways to do that. But in a lot of cases, like we have to seek that out. Like if we're waiting for somebody else to deliver a program or to deliver a training or bring in that speaker, then, are we really doing the things that we hope our teammates will do? Right. Probably not. And going out and doing it yourself just a little bit. It doesn't take a lot, right? I mean, there's plenty of resources out there, plenty of free resources out there. And the idea that you can not only do that yourself, but then really quickly share those types of things, even sharing with your team.
Yeah.
Right? Like how great would that be for a leader, for a frontline manager to even take this quiz and come back and say, here, this is what I just learned about myself.
Yep.
If you're interested, I would like to know where you fall on this. And now we know each other better, and it's accessible. It's free. We're building this team. We're building the culture, not top down, but from this team out.
Absolutely.
That can be a really impactful opportunity.
And again, it doesn't have to be some formal, get into a private conference room and be in person, right? This can be over Slack. This can be over a text message. This can be over a team meeting. Most frontline managers, they're looking for content to inspire and to engage and to activate their team beyond their, the core competency or behind the core focus of their team, whether that's sales, account management, customer success, et cetera. So it can marry very nicely to the organic kind of management of a team meeting. And I think it's also important to say this: experiences shape us. So if you are straight out of college and never experienced really any kind of major moment or haven't had to really be resilient yet, everyone has to find everyone is resilient in a way. It's going to be harder to seek resources because you don't understand. And the moment that you get the call that someone you love has died, the moment that you get the call that your best friend from high school's mom has cancer, the moment that you find out that your best friend's wife had her baby early, those experiences shift the way we think about the world. Because suddenly all those things that happen to everyone else, I am now in the driver's seat for. And so, and I don't say that in a dire way. I don't say that in a negative way. I say that in the sense that these things are universal. They are unpredictable and they connect us. And I just believe that is just an opportunity. When these things happen, it is an opportunity to rise and to get better. And while I have never been, I guess I am now as a CEO, I'm technically a manager, but in my previous roles, I never had frontline management experience, but if you are a frontline manager type or in a leadership role, it is an opportunity to not just become a better leader, but to become a better person. And I believe that most leaders, it's not about just creating outcomes, successful outcomes. They're in that role because they love developing people and they want to develop themselves. They want the challenge of getting better. And this is just, again, another layer of understanding yourself and understanding how to cultivate a team that feels collaborative, feels in sync, and I believe, again, helps build this resilience that make people better and make people want to stay.
Yeah.
Make people want to stay at a company and it makes them want to work for you harder and longer.
Yeah, no doubt. I want to come back to the villages part of this, because as you're talking and as I'm envisioning, giving myself the visual of what this actually looks like when it's happening on a team, a team of 7-8 people, right? Smaller magnitude at a larger company. But I'm also thinking about almost the exact same application in an actual village and places that we live. But we don't live in villages. Well, for you and I don't. Well, you kind of do. Dunwoody Village is kind of a village. As we grow further apart geographically, can you talk a little bit about, and I'm making the assumption that you have expectations here, but the expectation on how support languages can actually take our geographic expansion and actually start to kind of pull us back in a little bit closer.
Yeah. I talk about this a good bit because in general, technology in so many ways has siloed us, right? This device here, it's great. It's supposed to connect you. But what ends up happening, right? We're on our Instagram, our social medias, our LinkedIn's, and we're not out. We're not meeting people in that same way. Again, it's just different. And what I think is so powerful about what we're developing is this idea that we can use technology to actually bring people closer together. We're bringing people out of their silos. And I think on support languages specifically, we'll take the LA wildfires as an example. If you don't know someone affected by the LA wildfires, or you don't live in the California area, that doesn't mean you don't want to support. It's just going to look differently. So as you understand your support language, now you're able to figure out, okay, well, what organizations or what opportunities might exist for me to show up in this really difficult time for people I don't know, right? So that's going to look different than my colleague just found out that, someone they love passed away. Those are very different experiences. And your support language will look a little different depending on the circumstance and depending on the proximity, because by nature, you can't walk someone's dog if you don't live there.
Sure.
That's okay. But there are different, even as you identify your support language, there's all different expressions of support languages. And that's one of the things that we also help people with is it's not just identifying your support language, it's also teaching you what are some expressions of that you can use, whether you live across the street or you live, 5 states away. And there's a lot of power in that. And I am super passionate about this idea of SupportNow bringing back that village in a way that, again, goes beyond money.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm glad you mentioned, natural disasters or disasters in general, that are broad reaching, right? I mean, I'm actually anxious now to take, not anxious. I'm excited to take this quiz, because when those things happen in my life, my wife and I are very similar in this, but we kind of get a little paralyzed at all the options. And now we've got this choice to make, and we make enough decisions in our careers and with our family that we just get in a little bit of decision fatigue. And I think we both really want this closeness of whatever we do. We want to kind of see the impact or know the people or the person or whatever. And with the wildfire specifically, we didn't do anything until I saw a call from a person that I know call for help publicly. And in that moment, within the next 15 minutes, we responded. Because I knew exactly what to do. I wasn't paralyzed. I knew where the impact was going to be, and it just became really, really easy for me. But before that, and I learned that about myself. Actually, I think I just now learned that about myself, kind of relating it back to that. So you're doing a great job. One person impacted today, at least.
Great.
But those are the types of things that I think are there's just a lot more opportunity out there to help. If people know who they are, how they like to help, what to look for, because I really didn't, except the QR codes that were popping up all over the television screen and, my news feed and things like that.
Yeah. And I think that that's super normal. I mean, I think decision fatigue is very real for everybody in situations like this. It's very real for the family that's impacted, and everyone's asking, how can I help? And they don't know they don't know what to tell you. In the case of the LA wildfires, I just lost my entire house. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm so stunned that this could happen. In the event of loss, of course, I know you've seen this where people are just, the family is so stunned and someone's saying, what can I do? The family doesn't know. They don't know. We have to remove that burden from the family. The onus has to be on the community and the supporters to figure it out. With with discretion, certainly.
Sure.
And supporters also go through decision fatigue. It's hard. I say this all the time. I call it the fog of awkwardness.
Yeah, sure.
Where you are worried, am I doing enough? Am I doing too little? Am I doing too much? Am I too early? Am I too late?
Sure.
Those are very real feelings. And so what we are trying to get at is once you understand your language and different expressions of that, it makes it much easier to push through that fog of awkwardness. It's always going to be there. We're not removing awkwardness. That's a thing.
Sure.
But we want to help people mobilize and take action because we've all of us, myself included, I am not perfect. There's plenty of times where I look back and I say, I could have supported them differently. I feel guilt and maybe even a little shame of how I chose to handle a situation because of that awkwardness. And I just want to make sure that we empower people to show up better because we are capable and it's what we need. That's who we are. You are not designed to go through life alone.
Yeah.
You're just not.
And I think part of what I just took away too is like knowing that it's going to be awkward, knowing that there is no non-awkward situation to at least some degree. And you know that, and the fact that you're showing up still is much different than a lot of people who are pushed away by that scenario because of the awkwardness.
Yeah.
And just having a little bit of pride maybe in making that phone call, sending that text message, dropping maybe not a casserole, but a salad off, some groceries, mowing the lawn for somebody, right? Like just doing those things, even if it's awkward, even when it's awkward, still taking a little bit of pride in that is can be something that people should, I feel like, look forward to some degree.
Yeah. I think that you know this, especially in this country, particularly when it relates to death, we don't talk about it. You know, it's just now getting a spotlight. It's just now getting destigmatized. And so I believe that we're moving in the right direction. Like we are having more honest conversations as a culture. We're talking about loss more. We're talking about mental health more. Those are great things to be talking about because the more we talk about it, we actually remove the friction that it takes to actually now support someone because it doesn't feel as distant. It feels more understood. So the more we talk about grief in the workplace, the better HR leaders, frontline managers, and just general colleague to colleague can now be in a position to show support for someone that they care for.
Yeah. I love it. We talk about mental health a lot and the emergence of destigmatizing mental health over the past 5 years, and use the example a lot of like in 2019, if you were going to therapy, you had it on your calendar. It was a private thing, marked so nobody could see it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
3 years later, people are putting it on there and then slacking everybody and then saying in a team meeting, like, I have therapy. I'm going to a therapist. This is my time. Don't interrupt me. And it's respected. Like that's a really quick shift in a very short amount of time for as stigmatized as it was. And I think the death conversation, the caregiving conversation, just hardship in general feels like it's starting to be okay to like talk about, maybe even share your feelings and share your situation and show up for people a little bit less awkwardly.
Absolutely. I always say
much the work you're doing.
I think that there's a generation out there, and this is a pro to Instagram and TikTok, that are just more open. We are talking about things that our parents' generation just didn't talk about for whatever reason. Maybe your individual experience is different, but as a whole, it wasn't talked about. So once you create space and dialogue for that, again, now you can come alongside somebody. And it's great. And there's still so much work to be done, clearly. And I could argue that we've gone too far, right? Like I think there is a line that we have to be cautious of. And it's great to see, I say this all the time. We're talking about loss more, which is great. We're talking about mental health more, which is great. We're talking about infertility more, which is great. Like all of these things that people kind of held on to, they didn't feel comfortable sharing, now is, at least on certain internet applications or iPhone applications, it's kind of common to see. And again, that's how we create a culture of support and empathy, because we now know that everyone is going through something.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for this, Jordan. Where can people find you? SupportNow. More information about support languages.
Yeah. So anyone here, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Obviously, would love to talk about and really give examples of how companies have used SupportNow in the workplace. So you can also go to our website, supportnow.org. And then this week we're launching supportlanguages.com. It's not yet up. Again, we're like building this while I'm writing the TED Talk and all this. But supportlanguages.com will be up this week. We're going to be linking the quiz from our brochure site as well. And then, of course, Instagram is a great place to find us. I like to show up there to give some tips on what I call like supporter tips. And we have a great podcast that Justin joined us for. It's actually called Moms Like Me. Justin was our first male, but it's a really great place to learn about everyday people that are going through all different types of major life moments and what they've learned along the way and how to better support people in their situations. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity today. I am the recipient of a positive startup technology workplace culture. And so much about my heart around this is from my experience of having great leaders that I know would have jumped at the opportunity to do these things. And so SalesLoft is one of many companies I know out there that want to do right by their employees through good times and bad, and look forward to hopefully cultivating this channel more and finding more people that believe what we believe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Just you were kind to SalesLoft, but I've also talked to a handful of your former SalesLoft teammates who say very similar things about you as a teammate. So let's make sure we give you some praise as well there. Jordan, thanks so much. For the work that you're doing, that your team is doing. Thank you for your partnership with Bereave. Thank you for helping support the families that you support on our platform or otherwise. Really, really grateful that you all exist. We will send a follow-up of all these places where you can find Jordan. Also, join us in 2 weeks. We're going to talk to Leah Nobler, VP of People at Help Scout, or a Bereave customer, one of our early adopters. Leah is amazing. She's a highly regarded startup leader with, we'll talk about DEI initiatives, specifically looking into equity and why it's so dang important in the workplace. And she's a big proponent and a big leader of making sure that there is equity in the workplace for the employees at Help Scout and outside of it. So until then, thank you, Jordan. Everybody be well.